We all know there has been a lot of speculation and finger pointing over who the protesters are. Far right, far left, who?
The first thing that happens when we encounter new information is that we see it through a partisan lens.
What happened to common sense? What happened to we all have rights?
Some say the mass debate has become too politicized.
Global number of cases surpassed 40 million, according to Johns Hopkins University.
As the coronavirus killed more than 200,000 Americans, President Trump pretended that it was no big deal.
I wanted to always play it down. I still like playing it down.
Yes, sir.
Because I don't want to create a panic.
We all do want to reopen the country for a number of important reasons, but we've got to do that in a way that's careful and prudent.
Honestly, wearing a mask is about the most minimum you can do. It's really not that big a deal.
They just don't know their constitutional rights. People, we gotta read, we gotta know what we believe in and why we believe in it.
When I think about the protests of the summer, I think primarily about, especially after George Floyd's death.
George Floyd's brother.
George Floyd.
They are sick and they are tired of black men being unjustly killed.
The vast majority of the American people of all colors, backgrounds, race, religion, think what they saw is absolutely wrong and intolerable.
But we cannot allow the righteous cries of peaceful protesters to be drowned out by an angry mob.
This anti-cop sentiment from this hateful ideology called Black Lives Matter has fueled this rage against the American police officer.
When you say Black Lives Matter, that's inherently racist.
And you see how extremes can really can go far and can go wild.
Because I also think it's not a great idea to bottle all this up, because at some point you're going to have to talk about it. And for me, I'd rather talk about it in spurts than to wait until it's too late.
Yeah, we first started hearing about it in January.
China says the number of people infected by a mysterious respiratory virus has more than tripled over the weekend.
End of February, there was some panic at work.
Breaking news tonight, the coronavirus forcing millions more Americans into virtual lockdown.
And we didn't actually get COVID patients until the first week of March, I think. And that's when everything changed. The whole workflow changed. Idea what to expect. I knew I would be directly impacted. My job would change. But I didn't really know how to feel in the beginning. I was scared, but also kind of being hopeful, like, okay, maybe it's not as bad as it sounds. And then it did turn out to be as bad as it sounded.
China's deadly, never-seen-before coronavirus has now been found in 4 other countries, including the United States.
Some breaking news out of Italy. All of Italy is now on lockdown.
Around the world, there have been 121,564 cases of coronavirus.
Fear on the front lines. ER doctors saying we are on the verge of a medical disaster.
Tonight inside hospitals in the South and Midwest, some emergency rooms are now taking on a growing wave of COVID patients as officials brace for a tsunami of new infections.
And I was working on a pulmonary floor, so anything related to the lungs we had, so we were the first floor that really saw it. I've seen with COVID is I've never seen anything like it in my life. People don't realize it literally impacts every organ in your body. All the patients that I had, not only could they not breathe, but they were going into liver failure. They were all on heparin infusions, which keeps your blood thin, and we're titrating it super closely to make sure it's therapeutic. And they're throwing clots, having strokes. It hurts your kidneys, it affects your heart. Like it impacts every system in the body. It doesn't even compare to the flu. The fact that our president didn't take masks seriously, I think, was the biggest downfall with masks in general, because it gave a whole subset of people this fire to be passionate about not wearing it. They felt that it violated their rights.
Another issue continues to cause controversy tonight: the debate surrounding face masks and forcing people to wear them.
According to our new ABC News poll with Ipsos, 9 out of 10 Americans say they've worn a mask in public in the last week, but there's some partisan divide. 99% of Democrats compared to 79% of Republicans say they've worn a face covering.
I think it's kind of an orthodox that we all have to wear masks. I think the deaf or susceptible people obviously have to watch out for themselves, but it's that way with pretty much anything in history. Is you take care of yourself if if you're susceptible to it. Dr. Fauci put out early on the masks aren't going to help.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask.
There's so much back and forth from like Dr. Fauci, CDC, stuff like that.
Well, if people are not wearing masks, then maybe we should be mandating it.
And then I don't know if it was him or another source, but that they're actually going to help. They're actually going to help transmit it because everyone touches their face. They do this. They're pulling it, and then why don't we have hazard material waste specifically set up, instructions to set up that for our masks? Because we just throw them, and everybody touches them and moves it around.
I don't wear a mask for the same reason I don't wear underwear. Things gotta breathe.
And you know what? You want to call me selfish for not wearing a mask? I want to say to you,
yes,
all the
Rachel,
people calling me selfish, you're the one who's trying to force me a medical procedure so you can feel more safe.
So I just think people need to kind of, sit back and relook at it, understand that we all have different walks of life. You can't be mad at this person for having a different opinion than you because they have a different walk of life. They haven't seen what you've seen, neither you haven't seen what they've seen, right? So people need to kind of relax, and the problem is it's so volatile right now that the left and the right, they can't get along.
Okay. He's not worried about you. He's not worried about the people out there breathing on one another.
We've had no negative
cheek to
effect.
jowl. No negative effect.
We've had no negative effect, and we've had 35, 40,000 people at these rallies.
Quickly. It's just funny because we're not talking about like rights violations here, and I get it. Like someone telling you to do something that can be scary. I can see why people would be apprehensive about it, but the root of the reason we are doing it is just to protect others.
I implore you, wear a mask. Do it for yourself. Do it for your neighbor. A mask is not a political statement, but it is a good way to start pulling the country together.
So I think I first was aware of them like everyone else. I heard about it based on the news, nationally.
Chaos, clashes, protests, they've all intensified in Minneapolis.
They gathered hours before, furious at the death of 46-year-old George Floyd.
Across the country, what started as peaceful gatherings protesting the death of George Floyd devolved into destruction.
We want to show you page 1 of this morning's Minneapolis Star-Tribune. It calls the violence that you just saw a state of agony.
Minneapolis's 3rd precinct has been sort of the epicenter of all of this. It's where the officers involved in Floyd's death are believed to have worked, and that just went up in flames overnight.
I didn't personally get involved until a little later on. I believe I started in the middle of June. So I think for me, I was protesting for 2 reasons. I was protesting because I am black, and I think that I was tired of just sitting around and watching all this imagery come in, which was, I think, pretty tough for me. The biggest part is the frustration with the African Americans specifically, with the police and the brutality of police, specifically in low-income neighborhoods.
This is the Phoenix Police Department. It is unlawful to block a public thoroughfare. If you do not comply, you will be subject to arrest.
I think the shift, specifically we were looking at when it started in 2013, 14 to now, I think the divisiveness comes at when you turn it into a political issue.
But there has been a rebuttal to the slogan or the phrase or the movement Black Lives Matter that we hear all too frequently. All lives matter.
Overnight, a mural designed to spark the Black Lives Matter movement in Oak Park was defaced. Residents waking up this morning to find the words, all lives matter.
Black lives matter, blue lives matter, all lives matter. We fall in every single one of them boxes.
I really believe that all lives matter.
BLM is just, it's just counterproductive.
First, though, fury on the streets. Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter protesters square off. Protesters punched, flags burned, and it culminates with a violent confrontation with police.
So the protestings are peaceful, right? That's allowed by the Constitution when it's peaceful. But the BLM protesters, once they got provoked in some sort of way, a number of different ways, turned into riots.
At this hour, fires are still burning on the south side of Minneapolis after protesters took to the streets to demand justice for George Floyd, the unarmed, handcuffed black man who pleaded with a police officer to let him breathe as the officer pinned him to the pavement with a knee to his neck.
But the mass majority of the U.S. felt bad when they initially saw what they saw. Right, when you see the video of him with a knee in the back of his neck, very few people didn't feel that that was wrong. But as you go and watching more of the film that came out way later than it should have, of what led up to that, George Floyd wasn't compliant.
There is a brief struggle as the officers push the distraught Floyd into the back of a police vehicle. Seconds later, Floyd is pulled out the other side.
And then people turn it into a just completely violent protest that turned into a riot, and then it just kept escalating from there. So I just don't see how, if anything, it did not help Black lives or the Black community, because now everyone sees that what comes out of it if one thing happens. At the end of the day, George Floyd had a part in his own death, in my opinion, right? Don't get me wrong, he should be in jail, not in the ground, right? But he's still responsible for his actions. I watched the video. He was claiming he couldn't breathe before because he says he's claustrophobic and want to get in the back seat. I wouldn't carry there as a police officer. I would shove him in the back because he has to get in the back. What are you gonna do? But look, if he would have gotten in the back, he'd still be alive to this day. Here's the thing though, Black people don't need any help. They have every ability to get themselves to where they want to be. They don't. For anybody to think that they need help, it's beside me that they think that. Keep yourself in line, just like anybody else, and you'll be okay with the cops.
The phrase is Black Lives Matter, which is pretty simple, right? It just means what it says, and so I think when you start arguing that point, you're arguing people's lives and their value. And so for me, I wouldn't even say like personally, like I just think it makes sense. And I wouldn't argue anyone's life And so I think that unfortunately has, for some people, become a divisive issue because it turns political, because they assume that when you're talking about Black Lives Matter, you're talking about a political issue, but it doesn't always have to be connected.
The debate over wearing face masks is creating a sharp divide among some Americans.
White lives matter, Black lives matter, Asian lives matter, Hispanic lives matter, blue lives matter. What is so controversial about saying all lives matter?
Some Americans protesting against wearing a mask in public, despite the universal health guidance that wearing a mask combined with social distancing does help slow the spread of the virus.
What is it about this phrase, Black Lives Matter, that views it to be viewed as a political ideology, seen as hate-filled?
Masks, they're not mandatory everywhere, of course, including some of the states where they're seeing that rapid increase in cases tonight. Some are now arguing those masks infringe on their rights.
There is nothing political about these three words.
The first 5 years of life, you absorb a lot about your parents' understanding of the world, both their stated positions and what they do, right? So maybe you grow up in a household where mom and dad are like, everybody's good, everybody should be valued, everybody should be loved. Oh, quick, cross the street, there's a person of color. Right? And so there's all these little things we pick up on, the behaviors, the beliefs, the structures. And so you get off into the world, and you encounter somebody else with a different experience. And they say, hey, you might be wrong. My first response, generally as a human being, is to just say, my whole life has been a lie. Everything I believed was wrong. Which isn't what you're saying, but right, that's how it feels. And so you argue, right? You engage in this discourse, this conversation. And the funny thing is, it turns out that actually is a really poor way to change minds and to change hearts. That providing someone counterfactuals, evidence of them being incorrect, it turns out that doesn't really do much for them. It doesn't change our minds. It actually solidifies our belief structure.
Automatically, I'm racist? That's insane. What kind of idea is that?
By the time we get to polarizing issues like masks, like our disposition towards science, like our perspective on social justice or our institutional injustice, we've brought a lot of stuff with us that we haven't ever even processed or thought about.
Early on, things became heated between protesters and counter-protesters.
We're all Americans!
State troopers and DPS had to form a line to separate the two groups.
You are in violation of my constitutional rights.
Across the country, tense moments caught on camera as more businesses enforce new rules to stop the spread of the virus.
Yeah, so in the US, we see partisan identities as kind of the strongest social identities. And there's a number of reasons for this. Well, first, we need to compare it to the system in terms of that we have two parties that are very antagonistic and have become more polarized, both on issues but also on values.
I want to make
Mr.
sure.
President, can you let him finish, sir?
No, he doesn't know how to do that.
You know what? You're
not
stop.
true.
You're going to have
tape. True.
Gentlemen. I hate to raise my voice, but it seems to be. Why should I be different than the two of you?
But what we see here is just that Democrats and Republicans are more and more homogenous within their groups, and so Democrats look more like Democrats and Republicans look more like Republicans, and they like different sports teams, they live in different areas, their friendship networks become more homogenous. It becomes a big part of your identity, and so your partisan identity becomes just linked to all of your other identities, and social identity theory really would say that we derive some psychological value from being affiliated with groups, and we want to see our team doing well. And then getting some kind of psychological benefit from your group membership then leads you to kind of dismiss information that goes against your group, but also do some cheerleading in terms of your group, just because we have these affective attachments to these groups that then cloud our judgment.
They're from the United States. People from the United States. They represent the United States. They represent China. Okay, sir. You got your head up your ass. Sir, I'm sorry. You got your God bless you.
My president is a racist. Donald Trump is not a racist.
Did you come down here to create a lie and get one of my people shot?
I'm not going to buy into your narrative.
Oh, no, really? You create the narrative, sweetie.
I do not.
Yes, you do. Let's be honest with ourselves out here, sir.
And so once your preferred trusted partisan source has an opinion, then due to a number of psychological processes, you will fall in line with those opinions. Either because you sincerely, effectively just interpret that information differently because it comes from a trusted source, or because you want to make a political statement about your side.
The people united will never be defeated! The people united will never be defeated!
I think America is finally coming to grips with the elephant in the room. And once that happens, you are going to find the colliding of various forces. You're going to have it coming from the standpoint of African Americans and Black people, for sure. But then white liberals, white young people themselves who subscribe to certain ideals, certain progressive ideals, they have to ask themselves the question, how can I be a feminist? How can I be for human rights and not be for Black Lives Matter?
And in this moment, it is critical for those of us who are white to look at what we are doing.
I am speaking to white people, my people. We need to do better. So it is your duty to find what you can do to lift some of that load for Black people. They have been carrying the weight of our country for 400 years. It is our turn.
When America was born in the 1780s, African Americans were not granted human status under the Constitution. It meant, therefore, that America has always had to make good on that initial mistake.
Use your privilege. They won't shoot you. They won't kill you. If you're white passing this person like me, stand in front of someone. Don't let them kill your friends. They don't deserve to die. No one deserves to die. There's no reason to be quiet. If you don't donate, if you don't...
There is always going to be a struggle for equality in America, racial equality, gender equality, social equality, because those were not granted birth of the nation. Those with privilege are never going to willingly give up that privilege. And those with privilege are the ones who determine who gets what, where, when, and how in America. So you have to fight the power in order to get it. And so I think the struggle for equality in America is going to continue for some time to come, because in effect, it is those who want equality constantly having to struggle with those who determine that they are not equal.
Like, if you look all through history, these things have been happening. Like, we have been due for some huge revolution to make our society better.
Why do you describe this as a powder keg waiting to explode?
Because the injustices are systemic, they are long-standing, they go back many decades. This is a powder keg because this is the last time that I think the community is going to sit idly by without systematic change.
We saw some responses, for instance, Minneapolis City Council enacting some policy changes, so people were taking note of those protests.
Today, the House of Representatives passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The bill would prohibit racial profiling, ban no-knock warrants in federal drug cases, classifies chokeholds as a civil rights violation, and establishes a national registry of police misconduct.
Today, Louisville's mayor signed Breonna's Law after the Metro Council unanimously banned the use of no-knock warrants, a controversial practice that gives police authority to enter a home without announcing themselves.
We all got to be a team here. We all have to wear a mask and just fight this thing.
But we need to act now. We need to act quickly to protect our healthcare workers so that we can save as many lives as possible.
I guess I don't understand why people don't want to protect each other and protect themselves, especially in the face of everything that's happening. And I just feel like, you know, you got to help us out.
Donna Haraway has quoted this and she's expanded on it, and I can't remember the original source at the moment. But it matters what thoughts we use to think other thoughts.
So I do think that empathy plays a large role, because we know that this affects different people differently, and so it becomes not just political, but I think group empathy plays a large role. So the more that you can put yourself in shoes of other people and understanding how you could maybe help them, it becomes a large part, I think, of the discourse.